I don't know, Cheryl, if you mentioned, apologies for the cameras out the back. We have a lot of interested people who couldn't make today's session, and obviously our regional cohort, so bear in mind the camera's on. So the reason that this partnership program has been created is for a number of reasons. It is a new program and we're really excited about it. It's something different that the Office for Recreation, Sport and Racing has done before. So there might be a couple of teething problems in year one, but we are really excited. So we started off on a big consultation in the mid of 2019, and we asked a lot of people, everyone, what they thought the barriers were for South Australians to be physically active. That was back then that huge level of 34 sessions on 10 weeks of consultation formed the start of 3 big projects that our office has recently released. So we've got Game On, Getting South Australia Moving. Hope you've seen this document. It's pretty important for this grant. So let me know if you haven't or you can't find it. The State Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Plan, which was released early this year, which provides a huge detail about the level of investment that we will be putting into the South Australian sports sector. And the grants review obviously fed the release of this partnership program. Obviously, the other big thing that hit us last year was the impact of COVID. And the impact of COVID has definitely changed the way that we've thought about things, but it's also made us realise that this partnership program is perfectly placed right now to be launched. So it couldn't have come at a better time, and I'll give you some reasons why. We shortly, as an organisation as well, we're just about to release a new strategic plan which aligns to this grant program and aligns to the way the world is at the moment. So throughout the consultation, we found some really big critical changes that are happening in not only the sport landscape, but the landscape of South Australia. We found that people feel that they want to be active, and they want to be active more of the time. South Australians wanted more and different opportunities to be active in their daily lives and in their local community. So they felt that the products and services offered right now weren't adequate enough, and they wanted something more, or they wanted something else. We saw that South Australians are super passionate about their clubs and groups, even though they might have not traditionally continued with their sport and recreation club journey, where they're still really passionate. And I think something that we saw which was really key during COVID was that when sport was shut and clubs had closed down, it was always on the front page of the news, when is sport coming back? And it was really clear that people miss the community. People miss going out to the club on a Sunday morning or a Thursday night, having a drink and just being around that community. So it is really important for us. And there is a real desire for all of these industries, these groups that Cheryl mentioned that you're all here today, to work better together to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. So what were some of the key priorities that people told us? And these are some really critical things that I think are important to talk about later when you're talking about a grant application if you intend to apply. People spoke about the fact that they wanted to adapt and evolve the sport and recreation programs, services and approaches by providing new formats, new offerings, and putting an additional focus on active recreation or movement that just happens. It doesn't need to be necessarily planned instruction, but just happens. There was a real big, suggestion around supporting volunteers and helping to create environments that volunteers feel welcome. This is obviously something that anyone who's been around for a long time knows. Volunteers is always something that has been talked about. But the research is really telling us that due to COVID, we have a lot of people that no longer will come out to clubs because of their age, because of the demographic, because obviously, the virus being so real and alive, a lot of people are staying at home. So we potentially, over the next couple of years, are going to lose a significant cohort of our population that our sports will no longer have around. So how can we think about volunteering differently? How can we get kids and young people to think, well, what's in it for them? Maybe they don't want to come out and umpire all day, but maybe there's another way that they can help out our club or group. There is a desire, as I mentioned before, for collaboration, people working better together. we've seen that there's a lot of products out and about that are the same. So we're really keen to look at eliminating duplication. How can we make things more efficient? How can we use innovation, research and technology to get to the greater outcomes that we want here at the office, and ultimately the outcomes I think that everyone wants, that South Australians are more happy, healthy and have greater levels of physical activity. And there's obviously a huge underpinning bit about infrastructure, and although this grant program isn't about infrastructure, it is really evident, I guess, where we're spending our money at the moment, that infrastructure and the way people can walk, cycle, play is really important for us to continue to grow in the state. So what are our key goals, I guess, for our office here? We're really, really keen to get these levels of inactivity to increase. We want people to be active. So these are some stats of the National Physical Activity Guidelines. This is obviously not South Australia, but there's some really scary figures that only 8% of youth, 13 to 17, are meeting the guidelines of physical activity. And there's, adults are okay, but that should not be less than 50%. So our key priorities now, rather than getting into specific detail, are we want to talk to organisations that can help us get South Australians more active and get moving. So rather than focusing on sport and recreation, we've opened the floodgates and said, we don't necessarily care who you are, we want to talk to you if you can help us change that dial on inactivity. So our Game On targets, which are right at the front of this document here, outline some of the clear goals that we have for South Australia. And that's about moving the activity guidelines and getting more kids active. So what this grant program, I guess, is trying to achieve is a couple of the key criteria that we've seen in Game On, some of the key issues that we ultimately know from our consultation, from our research, will get more South Australians active. So to introduce, obviously, before we talk about the nitty-gritty of the guidelines, I just wanted to make you aware that there's 6 key areas within the Game On strategy that we are targeting, and through our influence with money, obviously as a government agency, we want to give money to organisations, to groups, to providers who can help us tick these things off. So we want to make it easy and non-negotiable for people to be active. We want to improve accessibility, connectivity, safety of walking and cycling. We want to get young people active more often. We know the benefits of how important it is for young people and kids to move at a really early age. We want to make sure that anyone can afford movement, physical activity and sport. So if there's a way to make it more affordable, more equitable, we want to talk to you. We want to make sure that the sport and recreation sector is sustainable. So COVID obviously saw a real kick to the sport and recreation industry. I think us and arts were the ones that, well, hospitality definitely, but in our little government area, us and arts had so many conversations about how can we keep our industry alive. With, these big organisations are letting go staff, and there's good people out there that don't have jobs at the moment. What things can we put in place now to ensure that our sector can remain sustainable? And how can we ensure that we have more and better trained volunteers? And volunteers might not look like the traditional volunteer of the tuck shop people and the barbecue flipper. How can we work with people that are interested to support us and to keep our sporting clubs alive in these really hard times? So I'll go into a little bit more detail around what this all means, but I just wanted to set the scene about why this grant program is new and why it's come out at this time, and why it's really important for us to invest in different groups, different organisations, and let's get chatting. So I'll pass on to Tom, who's going to talk the nitty-gritty guidelines.
Thanks, Bridget. So, like Bridget has mentioned, I'm part of the funding services team, so I've got, my role is more on the eligibility and just talking about making sure the program is administered correctly. Bridget's team is going to be responsible and able to help develop partnerships and the application more so, whereas I'm more focused on making sure it's run correctly. So important dates, obviously it's already open. It closes 3rd of March, so it's a tight window for a new program, so that's something that everyone should be conscious of, that the turnaround on this is pretty quick. So get your ideas moving quickly and start talking to Bridget's team. We'll screen them for eligibility in March, assessment roughly April, and we're hoping to notify you if you're successful after 21 April, so notice that's after, it's not, definitely not going to happen on 21st, more than likely to be around that period though. So the budget is $2.3 million. It's got two streams of funding. The partnerships game on section, which is what Bridget has covered at the start, is $300,000 per project. Now you can apply for multi-year funding, but the project caps out at $300,000. So what that means is in year one you might say, can we have $200,000, year two $70,000, year three $30,000. So in total it's a $300,000 project. Or you might say, look, we've got $300,000 worth of costs that we could do in 1 year, so we're going to go for $300,000 up front. But if you think that you can't quit it, so you can't spend that money in that year one, you want to be doing it over multiple years. The performance pathways component of the program is dealing with Olympic, Paralympic, Commonwealth Games outcomes, so I'll touch on that in a moment, but that's $70,000 per year, so it's at least $210,000 in total, but we're anticipating that most people are going to apply for 77. All projects are required to have a level of co-investment to drive the returns, so technically that there isn't a number stipulated with that. You could put in $1, but that's obviously going to result in a pretty low assessment on that criteria. But we are expecting to see co-investment from the partners and the applicant in this. So for Game On partnerships, I'll try and keep the language similar. So Game On partnerships is what Bridget's touched on, and then there's performance pathways partnerships, which is the Olympic Paralympic Commonwealth Games. So for Game On, legal entity, so we've opened it up. Traditionally, we've only ever been really dealing with not-for-profits, so for-profits are now eligible, have to be operating for 12 months or longer, and the key one is you need to be able to evidence a partnership with at least one other organisation to be eligible. And I'll touch on how you prove that in a second. Beyond that, additional partners will be considered highly favourable, so that then becomes assessment. So you've got eligibility, you need to have one, and then how successful you are will be based on how many further partners you have. Ineligible, so we can't fund individuals directly, and we can't fund other state or federal government agencies. However, they can be partners. Okay. You can't have an overdue grant acquittal with us, so if you think you're in that space, give us a call, we've got a team, I'll be able to tell you very quickly. And projects need to occur in South Australia. Partners may be outside of South Australia. Ineligible costs, so salaries or wages for positions not related to the project. So if you're pulling a FTE onto the project and you can justify and prove it, that's fine. But if it's not related to the project, it can't be considered part of your contribution for it. Grant scholarship programs, prizes, awards, pretty much our standard suite of ineligible costs for something like this. Probably the bottom one might be something that people aren't aware of, but we don't pay for preparing or submitting your applications. Ineligible, this is a project ineligibility, so this is not an infrastructure program. If you've got infrastructure, you've got a whole another area that you can come to for that. Projects that have already got active funding through all our grant processes, so if you've already been funded for what you want to apply for and you've got an active grant agreement, it will be ineligible. Has to support physical activity, projects that are deemed as business as usual. There's a couple others. The other thing I'll say is this presentation is a truncated version of the guidelines. So the guidelines are the most important document. So we always have to refer to those as the final word on anything. This presentation is sort of compressing it, so I would encourage you to all read the guidelines as well. So these are all in there. So what I was talking about, that evidence of partnership. So in order to be eligible for Game On partnerships, you need to have one of these forms filled out by at least one partner. It's in the application, there's a link. I think there might be some that you can find at the back, but it's all digital these days. So one partner organisation needs to fill this out. Now you notice that the first couple of fields are about funding. They don't have to be contributing anything technically. The applicant could be putting all the money or the co-investment up, and the partner might be involved in the development of delivery, which is what you need to outline in that main text box next. And then it's at the bottom of it, which looks to cut off his signature and whatnot. So that'll be attached to all the application. Now, if you've got multiple partners, you'd be expecting them to all fill that out. be a nationally affiliated SSO or an NSO operating under one management. It needs to support Olympic, Paralympic or Commonwealth Games sport and operating 12 months or longer. So there's only probably about 40 or 50 organisations in the state that are actually even eligible for this component of it. Again, the individual state, federal government, they will be partners of your rules. So with performance pathways, you need to have a evidence of partnership with your NSO, whereas Game On partnerships could be anyone involved in the development and delivery. With performance pathways, you need to be able to show that your NSO and your project aligns with the high performance plan. Again, infrastructure projects, not interested, any active funding, active projects, anything that does not support high performance sport, projects delivered as part of the school curriculum. Same again, salaries and wages are not related to the project, grant scholarship, prize awards, insurances, these are all, again, details in the guidelines. If you're confused or you're not really sure, it sort of falls into a grey area, that's perhaps where funding services can provide advice. Our phone numbers at the end of this presentation, we're happy to answer those sort of questions if you're like, I'm not really sure. Again, you need to provide documentation, the partnerships, so eligibility, partnership with the NSO, success will be based on how many additional partners, etc. So that same form, more or less, they've got the National Sporting Organisation that needs to provide that. Okay, so the final two slides are probably the most important ones from this whole presentation in terms of how do I improve my chances of getting funding. So again, on the guidelines, in the guidelines on the website. So this is for Game On, okay? So weightings in the far left, and then the headings are banded by grade. So alignment to Game On, 30%. So those 6 key opportunities that Bridget mentioned at the start, how you align to those is going to be a major part of the assessment, okay? The partnerships, so we're talking about how many partners beyond one, that's going to be the assessment piece. How large is the project, what's the value? So when you're talking about co-investment, if you've got a project that's $1 million, you're coming to us for, only 200,000 of that, that's big value for government, so that's something we're interested in. The role of the partners in the development and delivery, so we're not looking at letters of support where that partner's going, yeah, I like your idea, it's cool, I'm not actually going to do anything with it though. That won't go far. You need to have those partners actively involved in the development of the application and the program and the project, and then the delivery itself. Okay? Innovation, exactly what the word means. We want to see new things. Okay? And project delivery is, can you deliver it? Do you have any proven ability to deliver projects within timeframes? That's a big one. If you're a previous organisation that has seen funding that has continually blown out, that's going to be looked at. So we want to make sure that these projects can be delivered on time. Okay? Capacity to finance the project. So when you're looking at your funding, we want to see not just, we'll consider this, the budget for this in a future year or maybe down the path. We want to see, this partner has confirmed funding and signed off, we're ready to go, let's make it happen now. And then skills, capacity, experience to administer and deliver programs. So the application form, which is online, flows in line with this assessment criteria, okay? So the questions are actively asking you, how do you align with Game On? What is the value of your project? So it talks you through it. You just need to make sure you're answering them with this page in mind. This is why we're asking you. So for performance pathways, slightly different. You've got your partnerships, value and sustainability. So we want to see how that performance pathway will be sustainable beyond our funding. We want to see the talent pool, so how many South Australian athletes are you bringing into the Olympic, Paralympic and Commonwealth Games pipeline. Can you deliver it? That's the key one, as you can see with that, 35%. And then the strategic justifications, how does that align with the ORSA strategic plan, state priorities, and then your NSO. So a little bit different to the partnerships in terms of to Game On in terms of how it functions on the assessment. But again, the application flows in line with that, and that's what you will be addressing in your answers. How to apply, it's online, everything's online nowadays. There is a number of attachments, not nearly as many as infrastructure projects, but so the evidence of partnership, there's a few key ones. Apply online. I'm assuming most people in the room will actually already have a Smarty Grants login, but again, funding services can help out with any application questions if you've got them, and then Bridget's team is focusing on developing partnerships in your network and stuff like that. We also have a registration of interest form. It's not mandatory. Okay? The registration of interest process we opened up early so that people could start hearing about the project and start fostering their partnerships. It will remain open. This program is ongoing. So once the partnerships program closes on the 3rd of March, the ROI will remain open. So perhaps if you're not ready, you might go, oh, we still want to get our idea out there and prepare for the next round. Not mandatory, it doesn't involve in the assessment. It's just purely around getting projects out there and starting to foster them in the network. Cool. So that's where I conclude. I'll hang around. I think we do have a brain dead. So
Yeah, we do. Does anyone have any guidelines, specific questions for Tom? While Tom's here.
Cool. Oh, yes, sir.
We need to be. Why do you need a partner?
So the whole research, I guess, around, and this is a new thing, so
Yeah.
not a silly question at all, but through all of our consultation and all of our findings, we found that there's a lot of people out there that are either really doing similar things or doing things that need other people to help them actually deliver it properly. So what we looked at through the duplication and elimination of resources is we only have a little bit of money, you know? So if we want to get our money to go further and further and further, it would be beneficial for us to have, for you to be working with another organisation, another group that can either get benefit as well somehow, or either they can, support you in enhancing your project. So it's really about working together to get a better bang for buck.
Because I can imagine there'd be like a lot of protectionism going on. If you're trying to partner with another body, they'd be thinking, well, hang on, you're going to our area, we should apply for the grant ourselves.
Yeah, look, it is, at the end of the day, it's a really competitive grant process, but what we've seen through our time and what's come out of the grants review and the grants reviews online and things like that, if you are interested in getting into the finer detail, is that for our traditional sporting bodies, if we've got a really good example of our football, netball and cricket program, those three organisations have worked together really well on some big key objectives and outcomes, and they've helped each other to develop and deliver. To us and to them, it's not a competition. They're always going to have participants. It's about how they can actually work together with the limited resources that they have to actually achieve something more and more again. So things that we're actually starting to see in the sporting landscape especially are around shared services. So there might actually be an individual staff member, an FPE, that is the marketing and comms person for canoe, netball and soccer. They might be potentially the same individual, but they are helping three organisations, where three organisations couldn't afford one FTE alone. So it's around working together. Another example, I guess, is the partnership program. If you come to us with the best idea ever, and you have a connection at Telstra, and Telstra says, yeah, I want to put in 200K for that, awesome, that's wicked for us. You've got a grant that you're running on 50 grand for. Now we've got a $500,000 or something project because Telstra and a few other corporates are coming involved. We're ultimately getting better bang for our buck.
And another question I have.
Yep.
Can you use the funding with grants for something that generates a profit?
It depends on, there is a slide on that, we went through that. It is in the guidelines. So if you can really tell us how we're actually getting benefit from your grant, that's a chance we're willing to take. Every single grant that we have is essentially a risk for us. So if you can say, we're going to get X amount of people active, but ultimately they still have to pay a membership fee to us, that's ultimately generating a profit for you. And a lot of our grants, either non-for-profits, have that anyway. So a non-for-profit could have a program that we fund, but it costs $10, they're essentially getting a profit from that anyway. So the answer is yes, but we want to see the detail around it.
Yeah, that second bottom point probably covers that off a little bit. Whereas project ideas here primarily benefit applicable business or increase the profits. So as long as the primary reason for the project is addressing one of those 6 game on, if you generate a profit out of it, great, no worries.
And look, look, I used to be at a state sporting organisation, a lot of the things we would do would ultimately help our business at the end of the day. But as long as my grant and our application was servicing what I said it was servicing, then it's fine. Yes?
Within the partnership one, there was a eligibility saying above 75,000 turnover 105 million.
So are you referring to the sector, the different program?
Oh, okay, so there's not the 75
No.
partnership and partnership.
We've got lots of new grants out at the moment. That is the state sector support fund, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know the exact name of it yet, but it's definitely in
It's
the
not
grants
launched
review.
yet.
Yeah, you would have seen it in the grants review.
Yeah.
Not this one, yes.
Can organisations partner on different proposals? So for example, let's say Ashburn, just because you're looking at that, partners on a proposal for one idea, can Ashburn partner with another person on a proposal for the same grant? So
You itself can apply for multiple applications.
yeah, so if you, so for example, not Ashburn, AFL partners locking on one and that's it, it could be, we'll try for a few
Absolutely.
ideas.
And what I've said to people already is if I was you, I would be networking hard out there, and for organisations that tap into lots of organisations, I would be saying, Matt, Ashburn, how can you actually support this organisation's grant and this organisation's grant? Because ultimately, you could service a lot. You might not even write an application yourself, but because you're partnering with it, you're getting benefit from that as well. Yes?
I just wanted to 100% clarify in terms of the way that Tom was talking about them having partners help with the delivery itself. And then you were talking about Telstra giving 200 grand, pretty amazing. So we've got a few partners that potentially would be able to give us money, but we would be taking the money and doing the delivery.
So how can Telstra support you through marketing? I would count that as delivery. So if Telstra could put out one post on their social media platforms to say, did you know that, sorry, what organisation? Council is doing, that would be great. We would just want to see, let me go back. There could be a staff member at Telstra that would just maybe give you advice or things like that. We just want to see that at the start, you're not just going to take their money and go, catch you later. We want to ensure that there's still community lines going there. And as Tom mentioned, this is an ongoing grant program now. Our pool increases by another $1 million next year, which means that ultimately there's more money again. So we want those connections to be maintained so that when this time next year you're applying, you could even have even more ideas and partnerships.
And what I'd add to that is, when you talk about eligibility, it's just the existence of something. So the existence of an element of partnership, which just says like a very basic involvement in development of delivery, that will get you in the door.
Yeah.
And then when Telstra said, oh no, we're involved in to this extent and blah, 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 and then suddenly you start moving along that assessment. Yeah. So to get the foot in the door, you need that minimum, and then, but you want to be pushing beyond that. Definitely. Cool.
What I'm going to do now is quickly just give you a bit of a disclaimer and go, as a state government organisation, there's obviously lots of auditing in place to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So we have a funding assessment panel who actually evaluates these grants and actually looks at them, reviews them and suggests who to move forward. I'm not part of that group and none of the individuals from boards here are part of that group either. So we have to basically separate those two. So when Tom says that my team are going to help, work with you, we are ultimately there to support you, get an application up. We don't want to see applications that aren't eligible coming up because it wastes everyone's time. We want to help you through that. Because it's a new program, and because it's a new grant program, we're here to help you make those partnerships, establish those relationships, and really try and get the best bang for buck. But ultimately, we're not there to advocate. We won't be sitting around the funding assessment panel being like, yeah, that was a good run, I remember hearing about it. We're not here to write the application for you. We can't provide any level of detail about what the funding assessment panel says because we won't be in the room. But we are really here to support you. So just, if you do ring our offices and someone says, oh no, I'm sorry, you can't talk to me about it, probably because they actually can't talk to you about it. So we are here to help you. Funding assessment panel will help you with the guidelines, but when it comes to the actual nutsing out this project, we have a team in the room today and we'll show you a slide at the end with our names and emails that you can contact us for. So hopefully that makes sense. Awesome. Okay, now that I've got this disclaimer done, I did want to talk to you about some ideas. These ideas are purely from our heads, and no one's told us these ideas, but as we were thinking about what could an eligible grant program or grant application look like, these are some of the things. Noting that, through my disclaimer, these haven't been approved, they're not ones that are technically going to get money, but it's just some ideas when we were breaking down thoughts about what are the kind of things we'd like to see. These are some. These are all in the guidelines as well. So an eligible project would be a group of local government councils coming together to provide a series of new programs which might support older adults to be active. So the local governments coming together is the partnership. They would all have a level of investment, whether that's in-kind, resources, financial, to make that happen. The one I mentioned before, several small state sporting organisations or rec organisations partnering with a professional service provider to develop shared admin systems to improve efficiencies and effectiveness. So that was kind of my example before about getting one marketing and comms superstar to work across 3 or 4 organisations to ultimately get the best bang for buck. A sport or rec organisation partnering with a disability provider to develop a program, activities for people with a disability. A regional councils partnering with a high school governing council, a rec centre and a local business to develop an after-hours school program for youth. And a for-profit technology company partnering with 2 aged care organisations to deliver movement gaming experiences for clients to increase their level of physical activity. So they are some of the kind of things that we just put our heads down and thought of. I did want to give you a few more examples though. And this is fleshed out a little bit more. These are quite high level examples, but once again, just wanted to give you the opportunity to ask questions or tuck anything out. So this one around the shared services model could be that 5 sporting clubs, as I mentioned, working together to get a marketing, IT, comms, treasurer involved. That ultimately means that the clubs will have more time to focus on sport and rec and the actual delivery. It will ensure that they continue to be viable and sustainable, and it means that someone additionally is working, which ultimately for us, we want more people in South Australia having a job. So that's involving quite a few partners, and that ultimately is involving a couple of organisations coming together and saying, what are our needs? That aligns perfectly with Game On Opportunity 6, which is sustainability of the sport and recreation sector. Example 2 is about an exercise prescription idea. So this aligns perfectly with Opportunity 1 of Game On, which is lifelong physical activity. And it could be that 6 northern local councils working closely with the university and some local general practitioners. So the outcome might be that they are encouraging daily movement and maintaining social connectedness of a group of elderly people, which ultimately means prevention of falls or prevention of illness. How the program might look, it might look like a free supportive physical activity program for adults over the age of 65. They might undergo fitness assessment to understand those adults' strengths or limitations. There might be one-on-one physical activity guidance, assistance. They might be able to provide seminars to these people, come and try programs, events. They might work with an IT company or a PT to create online motivation, exercises and videos through an app, and they might be also able to provide advice and support to these people within their community. Example 3 I had was around active students or active children, which aligns perfectly with Opportunity 4, which is active young people. So it might be that a tech company works with a group of fitness providers, PTs, F45s, all of those body fit groups to create some content for some teachers in schools. So they might have a couple of teachers, they might understand the ACARA curriculum, the school's curriculum, and they know that teachers have so big full days that they don't have time for PE every day, they don't have time for movement. But these PE teachers might come up with an idea with some research from the uni as how they can make maths interactive and include movement, or how they can make English mean that there's a game involved. So the outcome would obviously mean that more students at school are active throughout the day. Teachers at school are supported with new ideas to deliver their curriculum, but embedded with movement. And movement and play opportunities are relevant, engaging, contemporary and enjoyable. And if it is relevant in the curriculum, we know that teachers are more likely to say yes. It's not stepping away from anything we're doing with maths, but happy to look at it. So the app might be created and the school teachers might be encouraged to use it, and it will really help support movement within the school day. What we've done for you here now is you would have received at the front an A3 document. This was A3 piece of paper, which is called an ideas canvas. This is not part of the guidelines. This is purely something that the team put together to help you think about your grant and to help ensure that it is eligible. So there's different elements that you can go off later, and it might help you. You might put straight in the bin. That's, you know what, I won't take any offense to it whatsoever. But it's how we think about sometimes when we're delivering projects within state government, about ensuring that we've taken everything into account. So if you want to use it, you can, but it has different boxes that align to the different levels of weighing that we're going to assess you on ultimately. So how does it align to Game On? What are the strategies? Why would we invest in it? Who are your partners going to be? How is it innovative? Does it involve research technology? How are you going to deliver it, and who's the target community as well? So please have a look at that. As I mentioned, there's no attachment on Smarty Grants to say upload this document. This is purely for us to give you a little tip and thank you for coming today to help you through the process. What I'll ask now is Kev, one of our team, has actually done one of these with an idea as well. So his idea is another good one that you can steal if you want.
Okay, so we've broken it down so the people at the back can see it. And there's alignment to Game On, strategies and value and partnerships on this page. So they're linked to the criteria that the Funding Services Committee are looking at. So we've ticked up here what does it match or meet with Game On goals. So it's this project is a family-friendly fitness community in the Western Torrens, for example. It's a boot camp, and it targets inactive people in a club or a school in that region. Now, when I say a region, it might be 200 metres in radius where everybody comes and goes. The entrance to the club environment, the entrance to the school. Not totally unique, there's a lot of things happening there to it. So it's a fitness community. This club wants to develop the community, right? And there's a lot of people in the club, every club, that is inactive. Parents drop off, watch their child, go home again. You see that all the time. So the more strategic people within the organisation and caring for their community see the parents coming and go, and they say, well, how can we help them? So they engage with a local boot camp operator. All right, so the target. One of the targets is those people, might be you and me, drop our child off, stand there and watch, pick them up again and go. And then there's a key time there when you as a parent can't do anything else but watch. You can't do all the other things that you've got to do. So, and also one of those things might be, we're all time poor. If you had a chance, would you do some movement activity? So there, the club and the boot camp operator want to target the parents straight away. Also, in the club, there is a pensioner club. Twice a week, there's bingo, they meet together, they come in, sit down, and they go away. And that's great, but they're an inactive group as well. And just across the road is a primary school. Hundreds of parents dropping their child off, driving home. Drop them off, pick them up, and the other happen. So now this community club has targeted this group. They want to make the difference for them. Over here in the values, we've identified a good accessible cohort of inactive people. So that's the list I just talked about. And they want to make the local community healthier. Now that's good for that community, but for that club, it means that they have a new resource of volunteers as well. People coming in and going. and that is hard to come by as well. So there's a benefit for the club, not just to develop the community. All right, the partnerships here. Right, there's the club. They're driving this. They've got a local fitness provider. It's their business, and they're the 21st century business model that can make a difference that clubs don't always have. The pensioner club are a partner, and the school parent group as well. So there's an opportunity there. And then in the longer term, it could be the school as well. So there's the partnerships all together. To give you an example of how partnerships would work. Right, the club is, and the 21st century business are the ones developing the marketing. The club within their membership, there's hundreds of them, 400 kids. That means potentially 800 parents. You know, the school parents drop off. 300 or 400 cars are driving them twice a day. The 50 or 60 pensioners groups. You know, there's a lot of cohort there. So that, how do you access them? And the club would, the idea would be to access to develop a relationship with a community group that just pays $100 a year just to use the facility. Okay. Now the people would pay for this, but it's $10 or $15 for a boot camp. So the club and the fitness provider would look to subsidise that. As long as they're getting people in, it could work for the fitness provider as well. Okay. One more point, partnerships and value. It's 30% for those, not 30%, 30%. That makes it over 120% also. Okay, innovation. Well, the targets in the community, you know, the clubs, everybody just walks past a cohort of people that we need to help move. We see them and we want to help them. The club sees them too, and they see them as a market, and also future volunteer-based, and also there's, you know, potential for, you know, getting them in a coffee shop, grow that community as well. And they see the development of the links with the school parents as long-term future. So primary school, that's their membership for the future as well. There's also they identified that there's no coffee shops in the area. And not most people like coffee. If you do fitness, do you like a coffee with your friend afterwards? Yes, you do. The club sees that as a benefit too. So there's, you know, lots of things that make a community. Alright, so there's some risks attached to getting inactive people active. So, you know, obviously the skills of the fitness provider have to be high end, but relationships with physios and doctors will be critical, especially if we're getting someone who's been inactive for quite some time. And not barriers to market to inactive people. That's the challenge that everybody's got. If we're inactive, how do we get active? Everybody wants to crack that nut. So that's a challenge too. All right, the reach. Well, and how they would. Well, we want to know how, if this project gets off the line, how much benefit has it been? Now, that's it. We always say, oh yeah, we played sport or whatever, right? But no, those days are gone, right? We've got targets. We've said to our minister, and our minister said it to the cabinet, we're going to hit these targets. So we are putting our vision on the line. So we need to invest in organisations who want to hit targets too. So we want to know, and we will sing and dance about it, if we've moved the dial. We've got more people moving. And if they're moving once a week, and then all of a sudden they're moving twice or 3 times a week, brilliant. We'll want to talk about that. So the fitness provider would say, okay, I'm getting 40 people a week instead of 10. Extra 30, good. And then 20 of them are not going in the beginner's class, they go into the higher end. They're travelling 3 or 4 times a week, and they've got a VO2. Anyone got a VO2 max of 60? I know I have. Okay, I have. So they won't be doing that sort of thing most of the time, but there's all sorts of benefits. All right, so we're told this is a simple community. They're us, the parents, our parents, and the parents who drop our children off at. That's simple. That's a market that's out there that we want to get busy, moving, and fit up. Well, how's the club? What's the plan? Well, the club's going to do it here. Market it within the club. It's going to engage with key people, the pensioner club, the school, marketing, Facebook. Most of us at our age group are doing Facebook still. Get rid of the adverts. A-frames, all of those things that other people are energetic at, especially the business provider. People will move. The club will generate the community. The club will also get more volunteers for the future, right? So that's just an example. Not to say that that one will get across the line, but that's just in your local area.
Thanks, Kev. I think you can tell that Kev's a coach. And he explains it to me, I feel very good about it. But like what Kev said, that is purely an example, and there are so many other things that we haven't covered as examples. I've had some great conversations in the last week, talking to people around apps and around movement, and I know we've got some really interesting people in the room today. Teresa, I can see you from Play It On. I've spoken to Stuart from Caravan Camping. There's some really interesting groups. It's also it's a great way. I know you've talked about how we measure it, but if you are interested in seeing the measurement, talk to a university around evaluation. Talk to groups around how you're actually going to evaluate, because we do have this grant, as I mentioned, there's $1 million extra next year on top of this, so it's a $3-point-something million grant. We do have this open, so if we're going to look at investing in something like this again, we're going to invest in the same thing, but through your evaluation, you might see, well, actually, we need to do this and this better. And so there is opportunities to continue that funding onwards. So, if anyone, I'll ask quickly after this if anyone's got any final questions, but we really want now this opportunity for you to network with the other people in the room. As Cheryl highlighted in her little opening, there's a lot of great people here that you could potentially talk to and get some ideas and partner with. We are also going to be here, not physically here, but on the phone, over emails, happy to meet with you over the next month. It is a tight turnaround. We do really want you to start thinking about things now, but knowing as well there is the grant over next year as well. So if you haven't got your ID quite there yet, I know you probably, would like going now, but if it isn't completely there, you can obviously look for next year as well or the year after. So, anyone's got any final questions formally? Yes.
So a university could be a partner.
Absolutely. So Alison here in the room is from UniSA, Health Sciences Unit. We've got lots of connections with universities as well. So whether it's Shape, Flinders, if it's UniSA, if it's Adelaide, that's something in particular, about sport law or anything like that. Absolutely they can, and universities can apply as well. Yes.
Just a question on that example. Is there 1 year funding application for a
Probably. And probably this one here might be a low to medium level one as well as far as cost is concerned. I think, Kev's put some idea. As I mentioned, this is purely our idea. Funding assessment panel hasn't told us this is getting money or anything like that. But I would seem to think that this is probably something that you could just trial. If it works well, you could look at applying for it next year. It really depends on how strict you're going to be in regards to your targets. If you think that you can get 3,000 people involved in 12 months, that might not be possible, so you might look over it for 2 years. But I can't say whether or not. I think there's probably a more low level on that example. It's more of a club boot camping level rather than some of the big statewide kind of examples. Yes?
So I assume that then one of the ineligible things was that it's not for any existing projects that are happening.
Yeah.
But then for next year, obviously that changes. So if you apply for something for 1 year this year, then you can, that's an existing project, you can then apply for it.
So if it's something that is your bread and butter, we want to see how you're enhancing it or changing it to do something a little bit different. So we're not just going to fund you for your general business. But if you're going to change your general business in line with some of the issues that we've heard in Game On as well. Well, actually, our general business might need to change or, because of the times with COVID and because of our research with Game On, we need to do this, and we need some money to help us do it, then we're happy to fund.
No, I meant like if you're successful in getting funding.
Oh, for
something
this year?
1 year into this year.
How are you going to evaluate it and how are you going to change it if you were going to look for funding in the future is the question we would ask. So
Right.
we wouldn't give you the money next year with the same application. We would actually say, thanks so much, what have you learned from year one? If you're looking at applying and increasing your target market or your reach, how are you actually going to do that?
Okay.
So if you apply for a 3-year funding
Yep.
project, you need to identify within that criteria to change that 3 years.
That's right. And look, you could be successful through a 3-year project. The first year could be your research, your second year could be your delivery, your third year could be your evaluation. But if we know from your application when we're actually going to see what we want to see at that time, then a 3-year spread over that would be absolutely fine. Yes?
What if your project commences during the application process? So for example, you've got a project which is going to run during the 2021 school year,
Yeah. If it has already started,
or may start, let's say March.
well, we can't fund it because then it would be something that's already happening and
Okay.
that you've got money for. It
Yep.
would need to be something new or it would need to be how you're changing that
Yes.
to support the
Okay.
game on issues and opportunities. Yes,
Two questions.
that's fine.
The first one is sustainability.
Yes.
So the support is for a particular project, for a particular timescale. You're not looking at something that's going to sustain into the medium to long term.
We would love that. That would ultimately be our goal. So if you could show us something that we have confidence that this idea is going to help us over the long term, for example, the idea I gave before about really supporting the volunteers and supporting our sector when volunteer is at a really tough spot. If you've got an idea that will show us that volunteers will be sustainable and we won't have to recruit and retain and all of that business in 10 years, awesome.
My second question was about the budget. So is it an all or nothing? If you apply for 200 grand, you either get 200 grand or nothing. There's no negotiation around, well, if you cut down a bit on your marketing, we can afford 150.
We look at it for what it is. So the funding, I don't, but the funding assessment panel don't own this conversation we're having. So they need to see in black and white what you're actually asking for. If you're writing it and you think, oh, well, if I didn't get that, it could, I might be more favourable because it's 20 grand less. You would need to make that really clear in your application because at the end of the day, all the funding assessment sees that black and white document. They're not going to see that your project might be successful with 20 grand less.
Yeah.
So if you make that clear,
Sorry, I might just add to that.
Yeah, go for it.
100%. When it comes to the request amount, we can never go over, but the funding assessment committee definitely might recommend lower than what you requested. You just need to make it very, very clear in your application what those points are and whether or not you would be able to or willing to accept less. The problem with that is it does create nuance and some difficulties with the actual application writing, and we try and steer people well away from that. If you did want to go down that path, you would want to have your application written and reviewed by someone in funding services to make sure it makes sense, so that there's no assumptions or errors in how the committee might interpret that. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Yeah.
any other questions? Yes, Alison.
Just to clarify, this funding round won't be open until January 2022.
I don't know, yes?
Well,
It's
that,
just an annual.
that is the intention,
It
yeah.
is an annual. The ROI will be up. So if you've got an idea, and I think something I wanted to add to Tom's comment about the ROI, if you've got an awesome idea and you just want to get people on board and see if it's possible, you might even be an individual that has an idea. How can we solve work hunger? If some people have got some ideas, that's awesome. We want that networking to happen over 12 months to ensure that this time next year submissions are ready to go. But I guess knowing that you know it's going to be out this time next year as well, if you're not in the place to formally submit something by the 3rd of March, then think about this time next year is when you're going to actually need to do it again.
Tom, will it be this time next year or could it possibly be earlier given that we had the grants reviewing? I'm just throwing that question out there.
Unlikely. I would say that there'd be reason confidence that you can have that this will occur at the same time this time next year. Because it's actually a 2021-22 budget.
Yeah,
So
next year's
we won't actually hand money out until at the very earliest 1st of July. So it is 2021-22.
So as you mentioned before, a really important date is the closing date. Between now and then, we have spoken to about this a lot, but the funding services team, Tom's team, is available for any questions about guidelines. If you don't know where your question's going to go to them in the first instance. If it is more around you want us to read it, say, oh yeah, I think it would be okay, or do you know anyone from a university that can help our evaluation, or has anyone else rung you about this idea, and can you create an opportunity for that networking? The team below, the second capability team, are here for that. As I mentioned before though, we're not going to be on the funding assessment panel. We can't tell you whether or not it's going to be successful or not. We can't advocate to you, but we want to make sure that you're not